And without further ado, one of my life best friends, not just one of my tennis best friends, James Blake. James, where are you right now?
I'm at home. I'm heading to Miami. So by the time people listen to this, I will be in Miami in full event mode for the Miami Open.
I was gonna say, like, you have this job. Is it a real job? Because it starts soon, and you're still at home, just in your socks, just hanging.
It has definitely already felt like a real job with a lot that's been going on this week, especially even actually since the Simona Halep announcement that we've
Oh
given
yeah.
her a wild card. But it's full throttle now, and I'm getting on a red eye tonight, and I will be there first thing in the morning. I go straight to the office, so I'm excited, and it is actually whether or not it's a real job. My wife actually says this is the only time she ever feels like I've had a real job in my whole life is these next 3 weeks at the Miami Open.
That's probably right. I wanna follow that line of thought and get kind of into the weeds about your pretend job in Miami. But since you mentioned Simona Halep, obviously that was a huge story last week. Going from, I mean, frankly, it seemed like, oh gosh, is she going to be? Is it done? Is it over? Is she ever going to play again? To, you know what? Come on down. Let's play in Miami now with that wild card. Who makes that final decision on giving her that wild card? Is that you, or are you a voice in the room?
Yeah, that one is more on me. So there are times when it's if we're getting into the weeds, there are times when it's a group decision because Miami Open is owned by IMG Endeavor, so they have a lot of the say. But when it comes to some of the tennis decisions, they're going to trust me. And when this happened, we actually we had already gone through a lot of our wildcard discussions, and some years the wildcard discussions are knockdown dragouts between one agent really lobbying for their client, another agent lobbying for theirs, another with me saying no, we need a young American in there, and going back and forth. This year it wasn't that crazy, but we did have, luckily we actually had one. We were gonna save one women's wildcard because you know what, you never know what's gonna happen, and we were so fortunate that when that happened that we left one this time. And as soon as that happened, as soon as I saw it, I was actually the first one that saw it on social media and just emailed the team and said, guys, I haven't gotten the formal request yet, but the fact that she's cleared and ready to play, I have a feeling within the next couple of hours, we need to be ready for whether she's going to ask. And we said, okay, let's, everyone kind of break on your own and come back and let's talk about what we think. So we, at that point, we read the reports on it, and we all kind of came to the same conclusion that we would love to welcome her back. And she's served her punishment. She's done everything she could. She's been cleared, so no reason. And we also, I mean, luckily enough, I work in my other pretend job. I'm a commentator, and work with Darren Cahill, who used to coach her and is still close with her. And I said, hey, has she really been practicing? Because you don't want to put someone out there that hasn't been practicing, hasn't been playing, and it's actually gonna be detrimental to them. We don't want them going out and getting killed. And so she's been practicing. Darren said, she's been ready. It's gone in waves at times, but she's been practicing and ready to go. So we thought it was great to welcome back a great player.
And believe it or not, contrary to a lot of fandom belief, you do have to make money. So when someone is a two-time Grand Slam champion and is one of the lead stories in all tennis news, it is a good idea to have her in the tournament when that interest is peaked. All those other reasons were great too, James, but also she's bringing in revenue. It makes it a complete no-brainer. So this tournament director job, like, how does it happen? Like, did you just apply on LinkedIn, or how does that work?
No, luckily I haven't spent much time on Craigslist or LinkedIn. They contacted me. Now it's 7 years ago. 2000,
9?
2018. It was my first year, so they contacted me in 2017. So about whether or
That's
not
not.
I'd be
That's
interested in
not.
doing it.
Hey, producer Mike, that's not 9 years ago. That's only 7 years ago. I didn't go to
I said
Harvard, but he
seven.
got. Oh, I thought you said 9. I was gonna say you're dumb.
I said
Yeah.
seven
I,
7 years ago.
can we, if he didn't say 9, can we dub over and make it sound like he said 9?
Let's go back to
Okay.
the tape and see if I said
Okay. Sorry.
seven.
Sorry to interrupt. You have a job. Go ahead. How'd you get it?
But they contacted me, and at first I wasn't sure. I didn't know if it was something I wanted to do, and then I started thinking about it and realizing It's a way to use the knowledge I learned on tour, and obviously our bodies don't produce the same way they used to on the court. So what can I do that still has an impact on the game without being able to be physically able to compete? So it was something that it became more and more of a trend, and now it's still very popular with a lot of former players as tournament directors. And the more that I've learned about the role, the more that I understand why it makes sense to have a former player doing it.
What is something that like I wouldn't know? I'm a former player, but I haven't done that job. Like, what's the number one thing that you spend time on that would be surprising to former players or fans in your new role, or not in your new role, in your role?
Well, I would say how far in advance a lot of this stuff gets planned. For example, when I was a player, when we were players, you expect the schedule to be out at a certain time. Like, come on, how come you guys can't get the schedule out? Having no idea that the master schedule is done months in advance. So this is when we've got a combined event. So you have to deal with ATP and WTA, and we have to come to an agreement on which matches are on which courts. So you want to have equal representation on center court, then on Butch Buckles court, on grandstand court. You want to have it all the way down the line. So to make that work for both organizations, you have to come to an agreement way, way in advance. So we've got email, probably 50 to 60 emails going back and forth with little tweaks of which one, is there a doubles match on this court? Is there going to be a singles match here? What's the timing for each one of these? So going through all that takes a little bit more work. And then the actual scheduling process on site is in when you got a combined event like this, you got ATP in the room, WTA in the room, ATP media in the room, and WTA media in the room. And you got to try to make everyone happy. And then there's ticket sales, which also has to have a little bit of a say. But trying to put that together and being a player and not knowing all that, thinking, hey, we can't just get the schedule out. It's something that I learned, and it's definitely very time consuming when it comes to kind of piecing that all together.
Let's talk about your time split, like scheduling, sponsor. What amount is just putting out fires that are kind of unpredictable? How much of it is just dressing your beautiful family up like you're going to Easter brunch and marching everyone around looking like America's perfect family? Like, what's your time split when you're actually on site?
Well, you've narrowed down some of the major time commitments. Is sponsors. You got to make sure to keep them happy. So that's suite visits. That's talking to them. That's keeping doing little tours. Sometimes they want to see what they're getting for their money, and so that's a lot of times more later in the event. Second week, a lot of the bigger sponsors are there wanting to see some of the later rounds. But the scheduling is every day. There's a meeting that could be an hour to an hour and a half every day. And then usually there's planning because I have to go through what I think my schedule should be before that. So that's 2 hours a day probably, just going over the schedule, which is way more than I ever would have thought as a player. And then putting out fires is a ton of time. That's someone's got an issue with the practice, and then a lot of that is just delegating. That's getting it to the right people. There's a problem out on the practice courts with there's a crack in the court because of the weather. Okay, I need to get operations out there. But now there's a problem because I didn't get the practice court I wanted. Okay, now we need to get to Deb at the practice court desk, and you got to figure out. A lot of it is just delegating. Okay, little things that you never think are a problem for me become huge problems sometimes. The first year we were at Hard Rock, I couldn't believe one of the biggest problems I dealt with, one of the biggest fires I put out was coffee. I know you're a coffee drinker. I'm not a coffee
Yeah,
drinker. I did not realize how many people would complain because we had changed coffee vendors, and apparently this one was not good. And every single European player and coach had seemingly came up to me to say, "We can't drink this. It's disgusting. I don't know. We can't have this."
I
So
get it.
we had to go. So we brought in Blue Bottle Coffee, which is a great, apparently really really good, and we gave them free coffee for the rest of the event because everyone was so upset about how bad the coffee was, and that's something that I had no idea was a huge deal.
It's a huge deal. I mean, James, that's the way 90% of Earth starts their day. Like you're just, I mean, you're the weird one, James.
Yeah, you've been telling me that for years. I don't know. Maybe one of these days I'll start listening to you.
I'm glad I was proven right. Okay, so something I want to touch on because we kind of like to create a framework. It's easy to say we're in a scheduling meeting. who is in that meeting and what are kind of the general topics that you have to get through each day? Like who I'm assuming there's a representative from both tours, someone else from the tournament. I'm sure there's someone, who's in that meeting and kind of what are the hurdles that you kind of traditionally have to get over day to day.
Yeah, so it's myself, my other tournament director, Kathy Stock, and then it's the ATP, usually whatever the tour supervisor is for that week, and the ATP media, the WTA supervisor, and the WTA media, and usually it's a battle between what's best for the tournament and what's best for. A lot of times, it's the media that has a big influence. For example, Ei Nishikori, is a huge star in Japan. Almost always he's going to be first up because he doesn't mind it, first of all, but also because that's when it's better for playing in Japanese media. That's better timing for them. And then we don't want to put some of the European stars later in the evening because that's going to be middle of the night where a lot of their fans will be watching. So the media is asking for, hey, can we have Andy Murray in the middle of the day instead of the night match? Well, for the tournament, maybe he's the biggest draw that day, and we want him at night. So now we got a battle, and it's okay. What's going to be more important? And a lot of that just comes down to compromising. It's okay. You know what? This time we'll do that. We'll put Andy Murray during the day. It's not the best for the tournament, but next time now know that if we do it this time, if he wins, next time we got to put him as the night match. Okay, we can work with that, and we'll shift around, and we'll do this, and so a lot of it is just kind of compromising. Every once in a while, there's a trade between the ATP and WTA. Well, look, we've got three massive matches that we have to put out here, and we don't have that space on grandstand. We'd have to relegate that to court one. Well, can we switch? And then the next day we'll switch it again to another ATP match. Okay, well, so a lot of it is just compromising, and I think it helps. The reason I think having a former player there, like myself, to help is that I can understand when players will have an issue with that. And I can say, hey, no, 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 there's no way we can do that. We can't put so and so out on court one because they really take that seriously and they want to be on stadium. And then one thing that I've actually done a few times that they've been a little surprised by is, well, you know what? Let's go ask the player. Let's ask if they're okay with it because they're usually making these decisions almost not even thinking about the players opinions. This is what we think is best for the player. Well, okay, that's what you think, but let's go to the source. I mean, last year we had a huge discussion. We were probably in there for an hour battling over this Alcaraz Fritz match, which was the best match, one of the best matches of the tournament, and one of the biggest draws. Number one American, former, defending champion, superstar, Grand Slam champion. Well, we want to play it at night, but you know what? It's better for them because of the way the tournament is. When they have to come back for their next match, it's better if they play during the day. And after an hour and a half, we've been battling. And where are we going to put him? What's fair? What's the best? I said, can I just call them? Let's just call Carlos's agent, and I'm going to call Mike Russell and say, hey guys, are you cool with playing at night? Because that's better for us and better for everyone. Is that a big deal? If it is a big deal, we'll go right back into the room and we'll talk about it again. But we called them. They said, okay, all right, meeting over. They're good with it. I think that's something that a lot of other non-players wouldn't have the ability to do, to go to the players and say, hey, let's think about what they care about.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. They're like the novel innovation you're bringing is just asking the players.
It is. I mean, we're letting people in on the secret, and maybe I'm not as smart as people seem to think I am. I just
Oh,
come up
for sure, you're not as smart as people think you are. Like just so we're very clear on this. So when you're saying that, basically, like, I'll promise you, hey, basically, I'll get you the next time. We're stuck into this TV schedule. Certain markets are requesting certain players, and players are mostly rational. I was largely irrational, but like they kind of get it, I think, most times. But I'm also sure that it's not a guarantee if you say the next time we'll get you, because then the next time you might be stuck again. Give me like an anonymous story of someone just losing it on you, like your first experience or your biggest experience as tournament director, where you're like, oh, I'm on the other side of the players now. I am outside looking in.
Yeah, so I'll give you two. So I'll be equal opportunity. Yeah, one on the men's side and one on the women's side. On the men's side, we'll keep it
And if you want to
anonymous.
name names, go ahead. If you
No, no,
want to
no.
name names, go ahead, but you don't have to. I'd like you to.
we'll keep it anonymous. On the men's side, it was, well, I'll name one name. So it was my first year, so 2018. We were still at Crandon Park, and Nick Kyrgios, huge story, as he still is, always big draw. And we had him on Stadium, and another player that was far more accomplished, not a Grand Slam champion, but a Masters 1000 champion, a very, very top player. And he was on Grandstand, and he was pretty unhappy about that. And so he had his agent, someone from his team, come and say, "Hey, so and so is very upset and really wants to talk to you." So I have to go to the locker room, and he's like, "What is this? BS. He hasn't accomplished this. Look at my resume. Look at his resume." And I was like, "Look, we put him out on one of the outer courts for doubles, and we actually had a security risk because we had so many people rushing to get there. Like, so our only option, we got to put him on Stadium. It's just such a big story. We have to do it. I'm really, really sorry." He was pissed, but he got over it, which was great. On the women's side, I think there's a great champion that is probably still upset at me because we had a situation where it was one year. It was actually our first year at Hard Rock, and we had so many great women players. And one section, one half, was just stacked with Serena, Osaka, just tons and tons of players. And we had the situation where the number of, like I said, that schedule that's way in advance, we had so many sort of center court, grandstand court matches for the women's side, and one of them was going to have to be on an actual like outer court, like a court six kind of a thing. And it was between two players that their resumes were almost exactly the same, and they're both Hall of Famers, probably Hall of Famers. So you would know better than me, but both of them two Grand Slam titles, um, number one in the world. I mean, unbelievable. Both great players, both deserving of a center court. But we had to pick one. One was going to go, and no matter who I picked, it was going to be the wrong one. But one of them had a little bit more of a following. She was from a Spanish-speaking country that had more of the Latin. We have a lot of Latin American fans, and so we figured she was going to be a little bit more popular. So the other one that got put on an outer court, I got told later that day that she's looking for me, and
Ooh, she's looking for you.
she's looking for me.
Ooh,
And
someone sent out someone. This is like The Wire. Someone set out the word.
yeah, so she was not happy at all, and I think to this day she's still like bitter towards me because I put her on an outer court. But I mean, if I had to do it all over again, I think I would have done it exactly the
Yeah,
same.
I mean, if you had to do it all again, you would still put Muguruza on Stadium Court, and then, I'm just glad Zverev got over it. That's fantastic that happened for you. That's great. Like I love that for you. That's great. You
You're
don't have to
you're
confirm or deny
you're
anything,
naming
but that's
names, and
I'm
you're
glad. That's just my guess. I don't know this for sure. I honestly don't know these stories, but yeah.
yeah.
So glad that you and Zverev are still good. Muguruza's out of the she's largely out of the picture now, so you don't have to worry about that again. That's
I don't have to worry
fantastic.
about that at all anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. So something that like I put out, I got a couple of texts last week during practice week of Indian Wells, and obviously the balls normally get a little crazy there, a little fluffed up, but it seemed extreme this year, right? So it seemed like they just were real bad, and so I was kind of making jokes about it. I would like put the ball next to like a troll doll in a side by side, or I posted one because they don't use Wilson at the Master Series event. So I put one of like Tom Hanks, like screaming Wilson, just messing around with it. And I got more responses where it was like, oh yeah, that sucks. Where's Tommy Haas? I'm like, what do you expect Tommy Haas to do? It's a tournament director in Indian Wells to do the day before the event, order 26,000 cases from Taiwan. Like, how much say do you guys have in the ball? But it's a tour deal, right? Like it's a pre-negotiated deal for the year, or do you actually have some say, or is it an individual tournament buy for the ball sponsor?
It's an individual tournament, so actually I had some say. That was our sponsor was the deal was up. I believe it was my second year, so 2019, and they sent me cases of balls to test for different companies, and it ended up being, look, I had to say that's where I'm just a voice in the room. I definitely don't have the final say on that because there's a lot of dollars being thrown around there, and it's not my checkbook. It's IMG Endeavors. But they wanted me to test to make sure everything was okay with the balls, and then it came down to two, and they chose Dunlop, which has been our sponsor now for the last few years, 5 years, I believe. And we feel really happy with that decision. But that is something that, yeah, if like the day before something goes wrong, there's no changing it at that
There's no
point.
chance.
But it's something that is a decision, whether it's a year in advance or however many years in advance your deal goes. That's when you have the opportunity to change. And so for Indian Wells, I don't know how long their deal is. I don't know when they're able to get out of that if they want to look to other balls. But for us, we've been very happy with Dunlop. We've been very happy with the way it's played, and we did testing. We made sure, okay, this is, I'm going to hit with it. Granted, I don't hit like the tour players anymore, but I can still hit a little bit and see, okay, this one's going to last. This one feels like I'd be comfortable playing with it. But you know, Indian Wells in Miami, the difference a lot of times is those court surfaces. I know you've talked about that, how gritty it
Yeah.
is in Indian Wells. So I think that's going to tear up nearly any ball. And so I think, unfortunately, that may be misplaced with with the anger because it might be more having to do
Yep.
with the.
Yeah. And also like I'm gonna yeah, I'm happy to say when I'm wrong, but then you're watching Indian Wells and the court is faster than it's been before. Like the ball actually is traveling through the air decently. Someone, I guess someone else was like, well, Murray said it's traveling. Like, well, what do you say to that? I'm like, well, then trust Murray. He's the one playing.
Yeah,
Like, I
absolutely.
mean, like it's pretty straightforward. Now, as it like the ball thing, it seems like it's kind of a macro issue. And this is kind of the problem in a lot of different areas of tennis is each tournament has to decide in a silo. So therefore, they make a decision. You know, people are going to come from Indian Wells, where it's a completely different surface. You know, they're both hard, but they play completely differently. Pen ball, switch, adjust to Dunlop. How do we fix these macro issues and establish lines of communication? Is that the ATP's job to kind of connect the dots? Like, shit, you said you don't know when Indian Wells's contract is up. Is there room for like a macro conversation so that the players aren't rightfully complaining throughout the year about having to switch kind of every week? Because that does matter.
Absolutely, and I think we need to establish you as the commissioner of tennis and make these kind of
Yeah, right.
unilateral decisions because I think I completely agree that there should be a continuous path. There should be, whether there's one ball or the surfaces can't be that different. I mean, last year coming from Indian Wells to Miami, Indian Wells was much slower last year, and we heard those complaints. We heard those kind of questions from like Medvedev, and when we got there, we made sure our courts were a little bit quicker. That's something we can change every year because we resurface every year. So we can make it a little bit quicker. And we've heard the players saying they wanted it a little bit quicker. But I do think there should be a macro issue of let's have this be similar when they're right next to each other because people, a lot of non-huge tennis fans, non-diehards, don't realize that it's just hard courts from Indian Wells to Miami, but they are played totally different when it's a slow, gritty court to a little bit faster court to a different kind of ball to the fact that you've got crazy humidity in Miami but no humidity in Indian Wells, and there's a 3 hour time difference. So I mean, you got so much going on. Let's figure out a way to make it much more continuous. And I think it's tough because, like you said, every tournament operates in a silo. And as you said way in the beginning, a lot of it has to do with the fact that tournaments want to make money. So they're figuring out what deal works best for them and not figuring out what works best for the tour together. So we need one person that's going to say, hey, this is what's best for the entire tour, and we need to then fit into that structure and find a way to make money that way. And what we'll do is we'll make the tours stronger in general, and that rising tide will raise every ship. So my
Yeah.
nomination is Andy Roddick
Yeah.
for
Right.
president of ATP WTA combination.
Yeah, that would go over really well up until I said something wrong in the first 12 seconds that I was in play. And I will say too, like I'm pro player on these issues. Like we've all had an elbow that doesn't feel good when you feel like you're fighting that on top of everything else, on top of travel. And I know a lot of people will dismiss it. You know, they'll look at a paycheck and say, well, you know, stop complaining. It's like, well, no, you have things at your job, even if you make a good salary, that you would change if you could. And if you expressed your opinion, and that led to potentially a pressure campaign that eventually led to change, you would use that tool also. It doesn't matter if you're in an accounting firm or you're a lawyer or you're a doctor or, in food service, you would still, if you could leverage your voice for a result, you would. Conversely, because, you kind of want to play it out both ways, the players always are pretty outspoken about, we generally want more prize money. Right? We want more prize money. We're into it. We don't like cuts. We want to keep growing. And then also complain about the balls. There is a trade-off there, right? Like you have to sign a contract to affect payment. And so I would just like the rational part of the conversation is, listen, we would vote for the best contracts in place for the entire tour. We would just like a little bit more communication between all of the separate silos of tournaments throughout the year. So there certainly is some nuance to that conversation.